It's been a year since Michael, my husband, passed away. A sudden stroke had taken him from us, leaving a void in our lives that seemed impossible to fill. He was not just my husband but my rock, my partner, and the glue that held our little family together. My son Ethan stepped up in ways I never imagined. At only 24, he had a maturity beyond his years. He put aside his own grief to take care of me, always ensuring I wasn't alone in my sorrow. Ethan had always been a kind and attentive son, but after his father's death, he became my lifeline. This morning, Ethan walked into the kitchen holding something behind his back, his face lit with a mischievous smile. "Good morning, Mom," he said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. "I have a surprise for you." "A surprise?" I asked, arching a curious eyebrow. "Come outside," he urged, his excitement contagious. I followed him to the driveway, the early sunlight bouncing off the sleek silver paint of a car I instantly recognized. "Oh my goodness," I gasped. My dream car, a convertible I'd always admired but never allowed myself to want, was parked there, gleaming in the morning light. "Do you like it?" he asked, grinning from ear to ear. "Like it? Ethan, it's beautiful. But how did you?" "It's yours, Mom. You've done so much for me, for us. You deserve this." His eyes softened, a touch of vulnerability breaking through his confident exterior. "I know you've been feeling trapped at home. I thought this might bring a little joy back." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Ethan, I don't even know what to say. This is too much." "No, it's not," he said firmly. "You've always sacrificed for everyone else. It's time you had something for yourself." His words struck a chord deep within me, and I threw my arms around him, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice cracking. "This means the world to me." That evening we took the car out for a drive, the top down and the wind rushing through our hair. We laughed as we sped down familiar roads, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. For the first time in months, I felt a lightness in my heart. Ethan didn't just give me a car. He gave me a reminder of what it felt like to live, to embrace the beauty of the world outside my grief. His love and care made the impossible seem possible again. When we parked back in the driveway, Ethan turned to me, his expression serious. "Mom, I know you've been struggling. I can't bring Dad back, but I'll always be here for you. You're not alone." And I believed him. Because in Ethan's unwavering love and support, I found the strength to move forward, carrying the memories of my husband and the promise of brighter days ahead. As days turned into weeks, Ethan continued to show me a side of him I'd never fully appreciated before. It wasn't just the grand gesture of the car. It was the little things he did every day that reminded me I wasn't facing life's challenges alone. Started with small moments. One morning as I stumbled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and not quite ready to tackle the day, Ethan was already there, apron on, cooking breakfast. "I figured you could use a break from cooking," he said with a wink, setting a plate of perfectly fluffy pancakes in front of me. "You're spoiling me, Ethan," I said, laughing softly. But deep down his thoughtfulness warmed my heart. "You deserve to be spoiled, Mom," he replied, his voice gentle but firm. "You've done so much for me. Let me take care of you for once." It wasn't just breakfast either. Ethan was always one step ahead, finding ways to make my days a little brighter. When I couldn't bring myself to clean out the attic, where so many of Michael's belongings were stored, Ethan quietly took on the task. He didn't pressure me to go through anything, just made sure it was organized and ready for when I was ready. One rainy afternoon, I found him in the living room, carefully arranging flowers in a vase. I stopped in my tracks, watching him for a moment. "Flowers?" I asked, tilting my head. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," he said, glancing up with a small smile. "I just thought the house could use some color. And I know you love lilies." My chest tightened at his thoughtfulness. Michael had always brought me flowers for no reason, and Ethan must have remembered. "You're something else, you know that." "I try," he said, flashing me his signature grin. But it wasn't just the thoughtful gestures. It was the way he looked at me, as though I was the most important person in his world. Ethan had a way of noticing even the smallest changes in my mood. If he saw me staring out the window for too long, lost in thought, he'd bring me a cup of tea and sit beside me in comfortable silence. If he caught me sighing over a heavy chore, he'd swoop in and take over, telling me to rest. "You don't have to do everything by yourself, Mom," he reminded me constantly. "I'm here." One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Ethan turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know, you're incredible," he said, his tone sincere. "Where's that coming from?" I asked, smiling at him. "It's the truth," he said with a shrug. "You've always been so strong, even when things were falling apart. I don't know how you do it." I looked away, the emotion of his words threatening to overwhelm me. "I'm not as strong as you think," I admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm barely holding it together." Ethan reached over and placed a hand over mine. "You don't have to hold it together all the time. It's okay to lean on me. That's what family's for." I squeezed his hand, grateful beyond words. He had a way of making me feel seen, as though he understood the depths of my grief and the weight I carried every day. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan's unwavering support became my anchor. He encouraged me to step out of my comfort zone, pushing me to embrace life again. He signed us up for a cooking class, saying it was something fun we could do together. At first, I hesitated, but his enthusiasm was infectious. In the class, I found myself laughing for the first time in what felt like forever. Ethan was terrible at following the recipes, often going rogue with the ingredients, but his playful attitude kept the mood light. When our soufflé collapsed spectacularly, he turned to me with an exaggerated look of despair. "Well, we might not win any awards, but at least we'll have a good story," he said, making me laugh until my sides hurt. Ethan's compliments, too, always caught me off guard. He had a way of making me feel valued and appreciated in ways I hadn't felt since Michael passed. One evening, as I was getting ready for dinner with an old friend, Ethan stopped in his tracks when he saw me in a dress I hadn't worn in years. "Wow, Mom," he said, his eyes wide. "You look stunning." I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. "Oh, stop," I said, waving him off. "It's just an old dress." "No, seriously," he insisted. "You look beautiful." His words stayed with me all night, a small boost of confidence that I hadn't realized I needed. Beyond the compliments and care, Ethan became my partner in rediscovering joy. He surprised me one weekend by planning a day trip to a nearby vineyard, knowing how much I loved wine tastings. We strolled through the vineyards, sampling different blends and laughing over our less-than-sophisticated descriptions of the flavors. "You've got a good palate," Ethan said, teasing me. "I think we've found your calling." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help but smile. "Don't quit your day job, wine critic." The days we spent together were healing in a way I hadn't anticipated. Ethan's unwavering love and support reminded me that, even in the face of loss, life had its moments of beauty and connection. And in those moments I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again, not despite the pain but because of the love that surrounded me. That evening, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows and carrying the promise of a storm. I was in the kitchen, finishing up the dishes, when the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely, plunging the house into darkness. "Ethan!" I called out, my voice cutting through the sudden stillness. "I'm here," he answered from the living room, the sound of his voice immediately soothing. A moment later, I heard his footsteps approaching, and his silhouette appeared in the doorway, flashlight in hand. "Looks like the storm took out the power," he said, shining the light around the room. "Well, this is cozy," I said with a soft laugh, drying my hands on a towel. "At least we have flashlights." Ethan grinned. "You know, this reminds me of when I was a kid. Remember those blackouts we used to have in the winter?" "How could I forget?" I said, a nostalgic smile spreading across my face. "You used to beg me to play games with you to pass the time." "Exactly," he said, his grin turning mischievous. "So why not now?" I raised an eyebrow at him. "What do you mean?" "Hide and seek," he said, his eyes twinkling in the dim light. "Come on, just like old times. It'll be fun. Hide and seek. Echoed, laughing. Ethan, we're not kids anymore. Doesn't mean we can't act like it for one night, he countered, his tone playful. Unless you're scared, I'll find you too easily. That did it. I could never resist a good challenge, and Ethan knew it. Fine, I said, crossing my arms. But don't think for a second I'll make it easy for you. He chuckled, already counting down from 10 as I grabbed the flashlight and darted into the darkened hallway. The house was filled with familiar shadows, made eerie by the storm outside. I found a spot behind the couch in the den, crouching down and trying to steady my breathing. Ready or not, here I come. Ethan's voice echoed through the house, and I couldn't help but smile at how ridiculous this all was. But it felt good, freeing, to let go and indulge in a moment of light-hearted fun. I could hear his footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate, as if he were savoring the hunt. You know, Mom, he called out, his voice teasing. You've got to be better than this if you want to stay hidden. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a laugh. His shadow passed by the entrance to the den, and I held my breath. Just as I thought he might move on, he doubled back, peering into the room with a triumphant smile. Found you, he said, shining the flashlight directly on me. Ugh, you're too good at this, I said, laughing as I stood up. Years of practice, he replied smugly. Now it's your turn to find me. We traded places, and I spent the next several minutes searching for him. I couldn't believe how agile and quick he was, slipping from one hiding spot to the next before I could catch him. It wasn't until I stumbled into the guest bedroom and opened the closet that I found him, crouched in the corner with a sheepish grin. Caught you, I said, breathless and laughing. All right, he conceded, standing up and raising his hands in mock surrender. I admit defeat. We both collapsed onto the couch in the living room, our laughter echoing through the dim, quiet house. The storm raged on outside, but inside, the warmth between us was undeniable. It felt like we'd slipped back in time, back to when life was simpler and our connection was unshakable. You're good at this, I admitted, shaking my head. But next time I'll win. You're on, he said with a chuckle. Then his expression softened, and he looked at me with that same warmth I'd come to cherish. I'm glad we did this. It's nice to feel normal, you know. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. It is. The power stayed out for the rest of the evening, and we passed the time by telling stories and reminiscing about the past. Ethan leaned back against the couch. His eyes locked on mine as I recounted a memory of him as a mischievous little boy. You were such a handful, I teased, nudging his arm. And you were the most patient mom ever, he said. His voice tinged with affection. I don't know how you did it. I shrugged, smiling softly. It's easy to be patient with someone you love. The words hung in the air between us, heavier than I'd intended, but neither of us broke the moment. Ethan reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from my face, his touch lingering just a little too long. You're amazing, Mom, he said quietly. I hope you know that. I felt my cheeks flush, a mix of pride and something I couldn't quite name. Thank you, Ethan. That means more than you know. As the night wore on, the storm began to quiet, and the house grew still. Ethan helped me light some candles, their soft glow casting a warm, golden light over the room. We stayed there on the couch, talking and laughing until the early hours of the morning. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. Ethan's unwavering presence, his kindness and care, reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there was light to be found. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I realized just how close we'd become, not just as mother and son, but as two people navigating the challenges of life together, bound by an unshakable bond. The storm outside had begun to calm, the rain easing to a steady patter against the windows. The soft glow of the candles we had lit earlier flickered around the room, casting long shadows on the walls. Ethan and I stayed on the couch, basking in the calm after our game of hide and seek. We should put on a movie, he suggested, stretching his arm toward the remote. Something light. No horror. I've had enough adrenaline for one night. I laughed softly, nodding. Agreed. Something romantic, maybe. He raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. You. Suggesting a romance. I playfully nudged his arm. Don't act so shocked. I like love stories as much as anyone. After scrolling through the options, he selected a classic love story, one that I hadn't seen in years but had always adored. As the movie began, the room settled into a comfortable quiet, the sound of rain mingling with the dialogue on the screen. At first, we sat with a respectable distance between us, but as the plot unfolded and the protagonists navigated their way through heartbreak and reconciliation, Ethan shifted closer. I didn't think much of it at first. He always liked being close, even as a child, and the warmth of his presence felt comforting. Then, as the movie reached one of its softer, more emotional moments, I felt him lean against me, his arm wrapping gently around my shoulders. "Is this okay?" he asked softly, his voice close to my ear. I hesitated for a moment, unsure why the question made my heart skip. "Of course," I said, smiling at him. "It's nice." And it was. His embrace was firm yet tender, the kind of gesture that spoke volumes without words. It reminded me of all the times he'd hugged me as a little boy, seeking comfort after a scraped knee or a bad dream. But there was something different now, something in the way his hold lingered, his fingers brushing lightly against my arm. As the movie continued, Ethan turned to look at me. "You remind me of the lead character," he said suddenly, his eyes warm and thoughtful. I blinked, caught off guard. "Me? How so?" "She's strong," he said simply. "Even when things don't go her way, she keeps going. She doesn't give up on the people she loves." His words settled over me like a blanket, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. "That's a sweet thing to say, Ethan. But I'm not sure I'm as strong as you think." "You are," he insisted, his voice gentle but firm. "You've been through so much, and you're still here. You're incredible." Before I could respond, he leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to my cheek. The gesture was innocent, affectionate, but it sent a ripple of warmth through me that I couldn't quite explain. I turned to him, startled, but his expression was calm. His eyes filled with nothing but sincerity. "Ethan," I began, unsure of what to say. "You don't have to say anything," he said, cutting me off gently. I wanted you to know how much you mean to me. You've always been there for me, and I want to be here for you too." I nodded, unable to find the right words. Instead, I leaned into his embrace, resting my head against his shoulder. The movie played on, but neither of us was really watching anymore. The weight of his arm around me, the warmth of his body pressed against mine. It all felt so natural, so grounding, that I didn't want the moment to end. As the final credits rolled, Ethan shifted slightly, turning to face me fully. "Thank you for tonight," he said, his voice quiet. "I can't remember the last time I felt this happy." "Me neither," I admitted, meeting his gaze. "You've done so much for me, Ethan. More than I could ever repay." "You don't have to repay me," he said with a small smile. "I just want you to be happy." We sat in silence for a while, the movie forgotten as the rain outside slowed to a gentle drizzle. The air between us felt charged, not with awkwardness, but with an unspoken understanding. Ethan's hand rested on mine, his thumb tracing small, soothing circles against my skin. "You're my everything, Mom," he said finally, his voice breaking the stillness. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Tears welled up in my eyes at his words, and I reached out to cup his cheek, my thumb brushing away a stray strand of hair. "I'm so lucky to have you, Ethan," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You're my everything, too." The weight of the moment pressed down on us, heavy with emotions neither of us could fully articulate. But in Ethan's steady gaze and the warmth of his touch, I found a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. It was a connection deeper than words, a bond that went beyond the traditional roles of mother and son. As the candles burned low and the rain outside faded into silence, we stayed there on the couch, wrapped in each other's presence. It was a moment of closeness I knew I would treasure forever, a reminder that even in the darkest times, love had the power to heal and to bring us back to life.